All right. This episode of Facebook Live and coming at me today is actually going to be a combo. We're not only filming this on Instagram Live and Facebook Live, but we're also it's going to be this week's episode on the podcast. And if you haven't listened to the Secrets to Winning podcast, make sure you download a copy of that to your podcast player. Fantastic stories, fantastic understanding. But the reason why I wanted to do this podcast today in this joint is a pretty powerful article was sent out this past week. And it was a first-person account on the European tour from Andrew "Beef" Johnston. And if you know anything about golf, Beef, I'm just going to go by the word Beef from here forward. Beef burst onto the scene in 2018, 2017 with his personality and his friendly demeanor, and the golf world really attached to him because he was kind of a common man. He was a little overweight. He had a big beard. He wasn't, strikingly great looks. I don't mean that in a negative way. But his golf was phenomenal, and the American fan base absolutely loved him. And he became a fan favorite to the point where at tournaments, he was a major draw. People loved him. They followed him. They were in mass as they went around. And Beef just recently wrote an article where he talked about his mental health struggles since this experience, how he had a breakup of a long-term relationship, how he was robbed. Personally, his stuff was robbed from his flat in London, and how he struggled to compete during each of these phases, and how he had to withdraw, and how he's taken the time away to devote to his mental health to help him perform better. And it got me thinking, this stuff's hard. The performance side of golf, performance, entrepreneurship, growing your brand, chasing the dollar, growing an empire, all the different factors are so hard. It's so difficult. And we never really spend a lot of time on the impact that it comes to us as a coach, as a leader, as a person, about how we manage our own mental health issues. And so when I read this article about Beef and his first person account, how he's taking time away and he's starting to find peace in his life, it really resonated with me because, I think I've got a theory that as we are growing and developing in our process, that the journey is so isolating that in our mind we romanticize what this success is going to lead us to, that in time what happens is that in vision of where we're going, we fall short. And we fall short so many times because that's what the journey towards the top of the mountain is all about. It's about falling and getting up. And we talk about the resiliency and getting up and you should fail. But what's the emotional baggage and the emotional bruises that you experience as you're climbing? See, when you're fighting for something that you want so bad, how do you manage the ongoing disappointment? How do you manage the ongoing angst? And then how do you manage the depression and the anxiety that you experience? Like, I got news for you. If you're on any kind of journey towards success and you're fighting for what you want in your life, you're going to get down. You're going to get stressed. It's going to happen. Like, it's the summer months right now and we're all packing to go on summer vacations. Does anybody ever pack for the airport delay? Does anybody ever pack for their vacation knowing that they're going to get stranded in an airport? No, they don't. And let me tell you why. Because when you're packing for vacation, you're romanticizing how great it's going to be on the beach or in the mountains or at your friend's house. And you see all the beauty of what you're going to do. Because for most of us, where we are right now, even though we're on our own path and even though we're doing the things that we want to do in our lives, it's harder than we thought. Let me tell you, 15 years ago, if you had said you'd be where you are right now, you'd say, I'd take it in a heartbeat. 100% take it without a problem. Then why are you suffering today? Why do you feel the anxiety, the stress, the isolation? If you're getting to do what you want to do, why is it so hard? It's hard because it's reality. And we aren't prepared for that reality. See, we are preparing for our vacation, assuming that everything is going to go okay. And we're doing that because we want to escape the misery or the struggle of where we are right now. And the hard thing is that difficulty is we're not prepared. Like, I think everybody who's packing for vacation should pack a go bag so when you get stranded, what's the worst that's going to happen? You don't get stranded? You look at that bag and go, man, mission accomplished. But instead, we get there and we go, oh my God, I wasn't prepared. Like, I said this about a year ago, or I said this a couple months ago. Like, I want us to stop telling our youth how great it's going to be and how they can have everything they want. Instead, I want us to tell them, people, listen, this road you're about to go on is going to be very, very hard. Like, at the level and the difficulty that you're going to have to go through, it's going to be almost expert level. So how do you become an expert at what you're doing? Well, you put yourself out there. You mess up a lot. You get better. You stick with it. You find people to support you and you keep pushing. Like, you don't look for joy. You don't look for happiness. Let me give you some stats about what I'm talking about, right? Okay. About 1 out of 4 people in this country, according to most recent research, are suffering or have suffered from panic attacks. The sudden burst of anxiety and stress that can overtake our senses. 9% of our American workforce, or not American workforce, 9% of our population suffers from anxiety and depression. 9%, 1 out of 10. That's unbelievable, right? About 30% of us will suffer from anxiety or depression in our lifetime. In our American workforce, 3/4 of our workforce have stress and anxiety significant enough to cause impairment in their life. Think about that. 3 out of 4 have enough stress in their life that it causes a negative impact. 40% of our American workforce suffers enough to cause significant impairment in their life, and yet only 9% of our folks are diagnosable. That's a whole nother rant about making sure you surround yourself in your mental training with qualified individuals who know how to deal with the realm and the full scope of your mental health and wellness. It's not about rah, you got this. It's about empowering the person in the mirror, to giving you the tools to understand the wellness spectrum between when we're struggling and when we're great. Okay? But that's a different podcast. I'm not going there right now. See, we all have stress in our life. And when it comes to depression, the loss of joy, the feeling of depressed mood, the inability of enjoying the things you normally enjoy, feeling hopelessness, extreme guilt that goes on for 2 weeks or more, it's the highest global health burden in the world. And it's the second leading cause of disability in the United States. It's about $14 to $20 billion in costs in the United States. And yet we assume that us that are driving and reaching for our goals and we're pushing hard are all of a sudden never going to experience it because we're doing what we want to do. And yet, when it hits us, we're not prepared for it. The reason why this hits me so hard, and it's why I love doing this topic, is not because I like to scare you or make you worried. It's to give you reality, okay? This is hard, and we are all at risk. I suffer on a daily basis from anxiety, significant enough that there are times that I get treatment. Now, I'm not trying to self-disclose for any other reason, but when my anxiety picks up, it hits me in my mood. I get down. I get very sullen. I get worrisome, okay? It is a demoralizing feeling, Chuck. It's hard. Fortunately, I grew up with a mom who believed in mental health and getting treatment. She was raised in a very tough environment, and she was in therapy ever since I can remember. And she always invested in helping herself be a better wellness perspective. So for me, psychology was never a stigma. It was actually embraced and empowered. So for me, when I share with my wife or my kids, like right now, I'm having a hard time. My anxiety's out of control and I can't shut off my brain because I'm worrying about everything that's in my mind that I have to do. It's so freaking hard. Thanks, Coach Rick. Good to see you too, man. Love you. Okay. For those of you on the podcast, it's from our Facebook Live and our Instagram Live. Look, we've got to break away from this idea that when we succeed, we're going to get to the top of the mountain like Rocky, and we're going to raise our hands, and we're going to have this joy of our life that's going to tell you how great everything is. That's just not reality. And what that does is that cycles into this frustration and this angst that we experience in our life that tells us that it's not about that joy, but it's that I got to do it again and again and again and again. That is overwhelming. Like, wouldn't it be nice if you were honest with who you are? Like, I think I wrote in the Mindside Manifesto about we all walk around with a mask on. That was sparked by a former teammate of mine by the name of Danny Zoll. And Danny was an outfielder on the team my freshman year. And Danny ended up being dismissed from the team due to bad drug tests. And he was dismissed after multiple attempts and multiple fails. And he came back around a couple years later, and then he came to one of our reunions, and he was like, "Can I come?" And we're like, 100%, man, love you, please come. The problem was the guy that replaced him became kind of a cultural hero within our realm at LSU. Well, Danny looked differently. And Danny had suffered from mental health issues for several years. And in college, what we didn't know is Danny was struggling with his own depression and anxiety. Okay. And it led him about 10 years after he was done playing to put a shotgun under his chin and pulled the trigger. Fortunately for all of us, he grunted and pulled back, and it resulted in significant damage to his facial structures. And Danny's had, I want to say, something around 40-something surgeries. And I brought him in to speak to the University of Alabama football team because I thought it was important enough for them to see a man who was a teammate of mine, a brother of mine, who had suffered that we didn't know. And Danny didn't come to that realization that it was really anxiety and depression that he was suffering for, but he didn't know where to go. So he turned to alcohol and marijuana to try to ease the pain, right? But there was an underlying mental health issue. And Danny now speaks. I'm not saying he's got it figured out. He's still working and walking his walk every day. But what was powerful is when I watched him speak that day, it hit me. Danny wore a mask long before. I mean, phenomenally good-looking guy, right? And he wore a mask every single day because he wanted to portray himself as being strong and powerful and all the other factors. And now he wears a mask every day with his reconstructed face. But it's the truest, most vulnerable sense of who he is today. His mask is really gone. What mask are we portraying to people that we got it all figured out? Like, I remember when I was in clinical training, they're like, don't ever self-disclose to a patient. Like, why? We want to make them feel isolated and alone, that they're on the journey and we're judging them? I suffer from anxiety. I deal with it on a daily basis. I've learned ways that I can try to figure out my path, my piece of managing myself. I know that when I get down, I get more sensitive to things. And I have to work to pull myself out of that. Coaches, if you're listening to this and you're online watching this on Facebook or Instagram, you are as susceptible to this as your athletes. The pressures and the burdens that we all feel, we must be committed to ourselves and our self-care. We must embrace the mental health journey to help our players and our athletes, our team members on our team, our people in our organizations. Instead of showing how strong we are, show them how authentic we are. That is true strength. You don't have to show and write a sob story. Like, I don't think to be a mental coach or to be a motivational speaker, you've had to be through trauma. I think there are amazing people who've been through trauma that tell unbelievable stories. But you don't have to find, like I've seen this trend recently among influencers who are trying to find their voice, and they have to pull up these stories, and they're taking trauma and they're glorifying it versus glorifying their resilience. I want you to find, like this article that Beef wrote is so powerful because it was raw. The Players Tribune has done more good for mental health athletes than anything else that I can think of in the last 5 to 10 years. Entrepreneurship, the game, life is hard. Don't give up, though. Find your pathway. For me, I learned mindfulness. Now, I didn't go to a weekend class. I don't teach mindfulness. I think it's a wonderful tool to use in my toolbox working with athletes. I find a lot of peace in books like The Obstacle is the Way, The Choice by Edith Eger Evers. I find a lot of joy by being outside, feeling the sun. I find a lot of joy by having control of my life. And where I find that I get down is when I lose control because of my speed, of how busy I am and how many hours a day I put in. But I'm not asking for sympathy. What I need is when people tell me, like my wife, my loving wife will tell me, you need to do some things to help yourself right now. Like, I'm worried about you. Okay, that's because somebody loves me enough to tell me that what I'm portraying may not be true to me. That I need to find who I am in the mirror. Like, wouldn't it be great if we all came out of our own closet and were authentic to who we are? That came from a dear friend of mine who was a colleague that I worked with in the pharmaceutical industry. She was a gay female who we sat down at lunch one day and we had this conversation. And we had deep conversations about spirituality and belief systems. And she said, Brett, you're coming out of your own closet. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, I've studied and worked with people who come out of the closet for many years. There's a joy that comes when they start living their authentic self. That many times our communities and our systems around us are threatened by that because of how much joy that they're living their life. But it's for the first time in their life, they can be authentic to who they are. Like, I talked to a professional athlete recently that is in a very strong male-dominated sport, and he gains joy from writing poetry, not rap lyrics, although they would have been incredible rap lyrics, but joy of poetry, to take complicated matters and bring it to peace. That's brilliance to me. Brilliant to the point that he's comfortable enough with who he is to come out of the and be authentic to themselves. Listen, I want you to be who you are. Just not at the expense of other people, okay? We have social norms here, like societal norms. You can't like steal from another if you feel like you're a robber or Peter Pan or a Robin Hood. That's not what I'm saying. I want you to connect, be authentic, because trying to live this life of success before we actually have the gratitude of success is exhausting. And it's going to wear on you. And it's going to rob your resiliency and your coping strategy. It's going to overwhelm you. Right? You do create your world from how you see things. But that is also influenced by the world that we create around us. Surround yourself with influencers that make you better. Surround yourself with people and energy sources that make you live. But it's not a travel brochure. You can go to the most beautiful beaches in Hawaii and have a bad day. It doesn't mean you suck. It just means that sometimes stress finds you. Or sometimes means that your mind, you have to be honest with yourself when you look in your gas tank, your emotional gas tank, and you look down and you realize you're struggling. That's okay. Like, what I want for you more than anything else in whatever endeavor you're fighting for is that you take off your mask. You build your tools to be authentic to who you are. I want you to go for what you want, but I want you to realize how hard it is, but you're prepared for it, and you will continue to get more and more prepared for it. I want you to embrace the conversations with people around you. If somebody says they're struggling, that doesn't mean that they're weak. That doesn't mean that they're hurting. It just means that they need help. It's kind of like being in the gym saying, I need help. It's a spot. I'm just giving you the guidance. And have you ever noticed in the gym when you're trying to lift heavy weight, the mere presence of your colleague to stand there and put 2 little fingers on a bar, you get the power to push the bar up? They didn't lift the bar. You just had the belief in you because you had somebody standing with you. I'm standing with you. I'm here for you. I'm your spotter. Let me help you. This is not easy, but you are prepared and you have support around you. I want you to empower yourselves to realize, just like Beef did, to share, to let people see the true you. And if they're not the right people for you, move them out of your life. We, as souls, are built for authenticity, for engagement, and for working that interaction with us back and forth. This stuff is hard, okay? But you're not alone. You're never alone. The reason you're never alone is you always have you. And if you have a faith and a higher being and a God, you always have God. If you don't, then trust you, okay? You're never alone. You're not walking this walk by yourself. You have people that can help you. Let us help you. If you need help, there are helplines. You can Google suicide helplines, depression helplines. If you need social support, go to your local churches. Find resources to help you. If you're a coach and you're in an athletic department, find the network of people that are going to help you. If you own a business or you run a business, you're struggling, you're right out of college and you're working in your sales organization, you're running rampant. Let's find other supporters around you that can tell you it's going to be okay. It may not get better, but it's okay. You can manage before we turn to finding other ways to cope that may not be healthy. Okay? Listen. The greatest thing that you can ever do is be honest with yourself about what you want and what you're willing to do to achieve it. That's when I find people become the most powerful version of themselves at that moment. I'll see you guys next week. I hope this inspires you to share it, to give other people the idea and the power and the presence to come out and to be honest with who they are emotionally, to be honest and have the conversation. If you're a parent, have that conversation with your kids about it's okay to have fears and anxieties and doubts. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean, it doesn't mean it's pain. I always love it's when people say pain is weakness leaving the body. No, it's not. It's pain. Be honest with what that pain is. Okay? And understand how it impacts you. See you guys next week.